and she's talked about her parents and the amazing mission that they had, and now we are going to be blessed to be able to hear her mother's story. So I would love to welcome Jody Collins.
It's interesting, I saw Debbie's notes, the little type. This is an age thing, I guess. My notes are about 10 times bigger than that. Thank you for having me today. What a wonderful luncheon. Beautiful faces, beautiful tables. My goodness, you've outdone yourselves. It's just really breathtaking to walk in here. Well, I'm going to talk to you about something today that has sort of evolved in my life. A few years ago, everywhere I spoke, it was about change. That was like the hot topic, change. And the last 17 years I've worked for Kaiser Permanente, and they sent us to seminar, retreat after retreat to learn how to cope with change. Well, that's kind of old hat now. And for about the last 5 or 6 years at Kaiser, it's all about process. How you process change, I guess, but everything's about process. And we all had, as managers, we had to figure out the best process for our department. And so it got so bad when I talked to my staff. I said, all right, another staff meeting, and we've got to talk about process, that my staff started making fun of me. And they said, oh, we're going to do process again. Process. It's just process and process and process. So I'm going to talk to you about process today. But this is more about God's process in our lives and how He's dealt with me and how He's worked through a certain process that I've identified, and it helps me. I've shared it with Shelley, my daughter, and my son. And so you know what happens when you share things like that with your kids, don't you? You get it right back. And so there's 4 words I want you to remember when you leave here today. They'll help you, I think. All 4, of course, it's alliteration. So it's wrestling, waiting, walking, and winning. Those 4 words will take you through that process again and again and again in your life. And I'm going to share how it works in my life. And, of course, when you're wrestling, that seems long. When you're waiting, that seems like forever. And then when you start taking baby steps, it feels a little bit better. And then you're winning, and guess the shortest in the process is usually winning, because here comes wrestling right after it. But I want to share with you how that's worked in my life. And
Ma'am, could you just get closer to the microphone?
oh, okay. Kind of scary. I can't see my notes and do this, so you're going to miss something, I can tell you that. But when you wrestle with a problem and you take it to God, you have to wait upon Him and wait for the right timing and for things to process. But I hope that today you'll be renewed as you think about this, and you won't see life as just one great big wrestling match. There's people that just think, I just go from one problem to another. It's like, every day it's another situation, another problem. But I hope with this little process that you'll see that there's times of winning. It's not all just a big wrestling match in your life. And I want to share from Genesis 31. It's Jacob's life. And Jacob, when I read about his life, I saw how he went through this process. And if you remember, Jacob had an older brother, his name was Esau, And Jacob stole his brother's blessing. He tricked his father into giving him Esau's blessing. And Esau was like really furious and was going to kill his brother Jacob. And Jacob had to flee. He had to go to a whole other country and live with his uncle. And he was gone 20 years. And during that time, he married a couple of times, and had 2 wives, but he accumulated great wealth during that time. And he had flocks and herds of animals and a huge family, and he was really winning. He was so prosperous, and everything was wonderful. And then God came to him, and he said, I want you to return to your father's house. I know what I would have said to God. It's like, why? Why would I even want to do that? My brother wants to kill me. I'm prosperous here. Everything's going so well. I'm on top of the world. Why would I even think of going back to my father's house and facing my brother? Don't you know he was in a wrestling match with God when God spoke to him and told him that? I would have been. I have been before when God's called me to do things, and I was very reluctant to do them. I wrestled with God, and probably you have too. But Jacob, he started gathering his things together. He got his family together, got all of his flocks together, and he put all of them in front of him on his way to his father's house. He got everything in front of him he could, and he went way in the back. And on the way, he wrestled with an angel. And while he wrestled with that angel, he wouldn't let go of that angel. He held on to that angel, and he waited upon God there. He said, I'm not letting go of you until you bless me. And he was clinging until finally the angel had to knock him in the leg and make him limp, and Jacob let go. And then he'd wrestled with God, he'd waited upon God, he began these baby steps, walking towards Esau. But you know his heart was probably in his throat, because he didn't know what Esau's mindset was. But when he grew close, I'm sure his baby steps were kind of faltering. But what happened? Esau saw him, and even though Jacob bowed down and he said, look, I brought you all these things, I'm your servant, I'm this, I'm that, Esau lifted up his brother and embraced him and kissed him and hugged him. I bet Jacob couldn't even believe it. This is the same brother who wanted to kill him 20 years earlier, and now he's embracing him. And don't you know, Jacob was winning at that point. And he was also going, phew, you know, looks like God is blessing me, and God has worked things out. But you know, that process, it's over and over again. You watch in your life. In my life, I've been through that process so many times, where I wrestle with God over a situation, and I wait upon Him, I ask for wisdom, I ask for His guidance. I don't want to let go until He blesses me. And then, in faith, I start taking little baby steps. I'm not sure all the time, but I'm praying for God's wisdom. And as I take these baby steps and start walking, God reassures me. And I build momentum. But you know, people so often, they miss the winning. Because, you know, they're just so afraid that it's going to be wrestling all the time. They miss the winning. And it can be quick. Winning can come quickly or long. Like right now, my family, almost every time I get together with Shelley or my son, they said, you know, life's so good right now. Things are just so, you know, so peaceful in our family. No one's got a big problem or anything going on. We're really winning. But it's not that I don't know what's coming. There's going to be some situation, and we'll wrestle again, but we'll win again. And I want to illustrate this in my life. We went to Ethiopia in 1964. Shelley was 9 months old. learned to walk on a Norwegian freighter. We took a Norwegian freighter to Ethiopia. That's why she kind of walks funny. 30 days on a Norwegian freighter. And we had the owner's suite, which was really nice, a big suite, and we got to eat with the captain, the first mate, and everyone. It was quite an adventure. But 1964, we went to Ethiopia. Great expectations, expecting really to live out our life there. You know, we built a home, we settled. I mean, we took every possession we had when we went to Ethiopia. And in case you don't know where Ethiopia is, probably all of you have known Shelley long enough to know, but it's on the east coast of Africa. It's not on the west coast where Ebola is. It's on the east coast. We're going there this Friday. So we were settled, just like Jacob was in his uncle's country. We were so settled. We'd been there 10 years. We had our home. Knew the language, our kids, my son was born there, Shelley had grown up there, learned the language. I mean, life was good. And then a Marxist overthrew the Emperor Haile Selassie, the king of Ethiopia, murdered him, arrested everyone in the royal family, men, women, and children, executed most of the men with a firing squad. They suffocated the emperor with a pillow and killed him. Our lives were turned upside down. Every day I was a school teacher. When we'd go to school, Shelley and my son would go to school with me. We would see young people who'd been slaughtered in the night, and their bodies would be stacked crisscross in piles. Their parents would have to pay 250 Ethiopian dollars, which was probably like 50 or 60 US dollars, to get their child's body back, to bury the body. We saw people executed. It was just, our lives were upside down. And we were really, we weren't really sure. Could we stay? Everything we had was there. Our home was there. One day I was teaching at the English school where I taught, and the headmistress came up to me and said, "I want to see you after school." It's like going to the principal's office, right? I said, okay. So I went and I saw her after school, and she said, I know you and your family live here. I was wondering if you would consider taking in 4 of the royal children, young children. She said their parents, their mothers, their fathers, they're all in prison. There's no one to care for them. Would you take care of three young girls? They were 12 to 8, and a little boy, 2. We did. We took them in. We raised them for the next year. Life was good, except their parents were in prison. And I agreed to take care of the children just until their parents were released from prison. Well, one day I was up at the American Embassy during my lunch hour, and my friend there came up to me and she said, "We've got to talk." I said, okay. We didn't talk in the snack bar because it was probably bugged. We went out for a walk, and she said, I just learned that they're going to take those kids away from you and put them in prison. I said, oh no. I didn't have any idea what I would do. I mean, the thought of losing the children was just beyond my imagination. I wrestled with that. For several days, I just didn't know what to do. I was frantic. I thought, if they come into our home and they take these children away, I don't know what I'll do. And I talked it over with my husband. I said, we've got to do something. We've got to get these kids out of here. And I said, I want to go to England. There's members of the royal family in England. They have to help us. And I don't know how many of you have husbands where you argue sometimes. We kind of argued over this. I said, it's the only choice. What are we going to do? Just let the kids go to prison? Well, he went along. He agreed to stay because the plan was he'd stay and get the kids wherever he needed to get them to get out of the country. He couldn't get out of the country either. He had $1 million fine levied against our mission there. He couldn't leave till it was paid. Plus, they confiscated his passport. So he was in big trouble too. I went to England. I took Shelley and Brent. We told everyone I was going because my mother was having surgery. Didn't breathe a word to anybody what we were really doing. In England, I found everybody receptive. I tracked down the royal family with one phone number. I went with one phone number, and I got lucky. And it was the brother of one of the girls I had. And he met me at the hotel, and we talked. I said, we've got to get the kids out. They're going to take them to prison, and if they go to prison, there's no telling what they'll do, because we expected them to kill the royal family. So, in Ethiopia, I had wrestled like crazy. I had waited upon God and asked Him what in the world was I going to do in this situation. And then I had taken those baby steps and I'd gone to England. And God had opened the doors for weeks. They worked with me to raise money, to get the airplane, to get everything set up. Now, before I left Ethiopia, my husband and I devised a code. Because our phones, we knew they were tapped. So we had a code. The code word was, for the escape, was surgery. Catherine was the kids. And it would go like, Catherine has to have surgery, the kids have to escape. The surgery's scheduled for this time, this date, blah, blah, blah. That was our little code. So everything was in place, man. I was on top of the world. We are going to pull this off. It's going to work. I was just praising God. I was so excited. So I called Denton. Denton's my husband. And I said, okay, Denton, Catherine's surgery scheduled. It's scheduled for April such and such at this time. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. And he said, Jody, listen to me. I said, no, listen, everything. Her surgery is scheduled. He said, Jody, listen to me. You ever have trouble listening to guys? I was just so excited. And he said, Jody, if Catherine has this surgery, she's going to die. I said, what? He said, you heard me. If Catherine has the surgery, she's going to die. She can't have the surgery. And he hung up. I was still in England. Everything was set. The plane was ready. Everything. You think I didn't start wrestling again? I mean, what am I going to do? I had to undo the entire escape. We had to put everything off. And I flew home. I didn't know what happened, but I tell you, I waited on pins and needles. I waited for like 2 months, not knowing what in the world had happened in Ethiopia. As it happened, somebody got word of the escape and reported my husband, and they took my husband and all 4 children. The government picked them all up. Now remember, one of them's 2 years old. You know, they say anything. And we were really worried about that, or my husband was really worried about that. But they didn't say anything. They interrogated all of them for like 8 hours. They let them go. But then I call and say, the escape's ready. Of course they can't. He's being watched. So 2 months later, I get a call from the royal family in England. I said, Jody, we've got 2 planes now. I thought, why do we have 2 planes? Because we still have 4 kids with my husband. They said, we've got 2 planes. We can do another escape. We've got the money. But there's just one catch. Okay, what's the catch? You bring out 6 more of the royal kids. I do what? I mean, Catherine was having surgery, but this is ridiculous, right? Now it's 10 kids. So I called my husband again. I say, Denton, we've rescheduled Catherine's surgery, but it's far more serious than you ever thought. I said, in fact, it's so serious, we're sending the doctor in to talk to you. So you go to the Hilton Hotel on this date, and you know the doctor loves to play tennis, so wear your tennis outfit, take your tennis racket, and wait for him in the lobby at the Hilton. I didn't even want to see my husband's face, but he said, okay. So we flew the pilot of one of the planes into Ethiopia. And my husband went to the Hilton in his tennis outfit with his tennis racket, and the guy contacted him and told him about 10 kids instead of 4 kids. But they set up the whole thing. My husband went along, and the whole thing was set. My husband would get all 10 kids together. I told him, I said, you know, just try to be inconspicuous. I don't know how a white man with 10 African children can be inconspicuous, but that wasn't the worst of it. He had to rent a car to get 10 kids and himself to the lake, which is about 3 or 4 hours out of Addis, the capital. He had to rent a car to get him out there. Guess what he rented? A Volkswagen Combi bus with black and white stripes, like a zebra. Meanwhile, I'm in the States waiting for this escape to happen because I'm going to fly to Kenya to meet them because they're all there with no papers, right? The 2 planes flew in, got all 11 of them onto the plane, and they safely flew out of Ethiopia. Meanwhile, you think I'm not waiting? You think I'm not waiting upon God? I just nearly never got off my knees. I was so terrified. First of all, they could kill the mothers and fathers in prison for this. They were already in prison. Denton could get caught with all 10. They'd just machine gun them all down if they caught him. When Denton's leaving the city, there's checkpoints all over the city you have to go through to leave the city. He came up to the checkpoint in his little black and white striped zebra, and there were about 20 or 30 army trucks in line going to fight the war. That they had a civil war going on. So he comes up to these army trucks, and very slowly he goes up beside them rather than wait in line behind all of them. He came up beside them, and they have this thing down over the road, so you can't pass. And one of the guards turned and saw him in this zebra and raised the thing and said, go through. He thought he was a tourist. God works in mysterious ways. I wouldn't have rented a zebra Volkswagen, but it worked. And he went those 3 hours down south with the kids where the 2 planes flew in, landed, and picked them all up and flew them to a game park in Kenya. And I got a phone call, and it was one of the pilots, and he said, the kids and your husband are safe in Kenya. They're at the Jacaranda Hotel. You know, go to the Norfolk Hotel, stay there. We'll call you, we'll pick you up and take you to your husband and the kids. You know, my heart was soaring. I mean, I really was winning. But you think I didn't wrestle? You think I didn't wait? And how good it felt to be taking baby steps as I went to the airport to get on that plane to be reunited with my husband and kids. Over and over that process works for me. And so I land in Kenya, I go to this hotel, and I'm waiting again. I'm waiting for that phone call. Finally the phone rings, and this guy says, I'm coming to pick you up. Now, I don't know who this is. It's an Italian guy. I said, all right. So he comes and he knocks on my hotel door, and I'm going with him. And he could have been the Ethiopian government for all I knew, but just I go with him. We walk into the Jacaranda Hotel. I'll tell you what's really weird. Shelley went to a preschool in Ethiopia called Jack and Jill, an American woman married to a Kenyan guy. And as I'm walking up the walkway into the hotel, a window opens. And it's her preschool teacher. She yells at me, "Jody Collins, what are you doing here?" Yelling. I'm trying to keep a low profile. I go, well, she disappeared. I never saw her again. I think she got the idea. But I walk in the lobby, and there's a stairs on the other side of the lobby. And the youngest of the Ethiopian girls, was coming down the stairs. And she looked up and she said, "Mommy!" And she turned around and ran the other way. Well, she went to call the other 9 kids and my husband, and just minutes later they all come storming down, and we just had this fabulous reunion, and we were all crying and laughing. Was I winning? I was winning. I was on top of the world. But you have to have me back to hear the rest of the story. I thought Jimmy Carter would send Air Force One to pick us up. He was a human rights president, right? He was in power. I thought, man, when he hears this, we'll have Air Force One here in no time, and we'll be home. Well, I went to the American Embassy the next day, and they told me, don't come back and don't bring the kids here. I was on my own from that point on, and it took 6 weeks to find a way to come home. So the next time you have me, I'll tell you the rest of the story. But the good news is, you know we're out of Ethiopia, you know we're safe, and we all got home safely. And believe me, I wrestled my heart out. I waited upon God. In that hotel room, I really was on my knees so much, hoping everything would go okay. I'll tell you, at the hotel where my husband and the kids were staying, the Ethiopian secret police found them, and they moved in to rooms. Denton had 2 rooms. And they moved into rooms beside them. They watched us every meal that we had. I mean, their uncle had stayed in a hotel. He had escaped, and the Secret Service found him. He jumped out the window as they shot a machine gun, and he showed me in England his pant leg riddled with bullets. So I was afraid in Kenya. Excuse me, I have to leave this guy for a minute. But we made it home safely. And we've wrestled many times since. We've waited upon God. We've taken those baby steps. And we felt the winning power of God. And that you can do the same. You can watch that process again and again in your life. And know that you're not going to wrestle forever. Winning's just down the road. Now the kids are all grown. They all have families. Shelley was 12 when we came home, or 13. So the kids, the 3 girls were all about her age. They're all married with kids, all settled, all been to college. So life is good. So have me back, I'll tell you the rest of the story.
She says that so easily, but it did take 3 years to get her here. Sometime when she's not in Kenya or in Ethiopia. Yes. Anyhow, thank you so much, Jody. It was really a wonderful thing waiting for that and being able to share that. So, and we just all pray that your venture next week, everything is just as it should be, and it will be. It will be. You'll be winning. Okay, back to my notes. Okay, I guess we've really kind of come to the end of our afternoon. I want to take this time to thank my ladies. I want to start off by thanking my hostesses, because this every year just is the most amazing thing. You walk into this room and